headlines. A controversial anti-corruption bill has been passed. The new law subjects public officials, journalists, and school faculty to a maximum penalty of 3 years in prison or 5 times the amount of gifts worth more than 1 million won. Koreans spend a record amount in overseas travel expenditure in January amid low oil prices and the weekend. And China's key annual political meeting begins, and in focus is how much Beijing is committing to military spending. Hello and welcome to the program. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. Korea's two rival parties have passed a comprehensive anti-corruption bill after much political wrangling. The new law is aimed at putting an end to the series of corruption scandals that are prevalent in Korean society. Our Ji Myung-gil has more.
The ruling and opposition parties put the finishing touches on Korea's first ever anti-corruption bill before passing it through a vote in the National Assembly.
The passage of this anti-corruption bill will act as a cornerstone in making our society more transparent. Korea cannot become an advanced country if it keeps its rank as the 46th most corrupt country in the world.
The law stipulates that public figures with influence like government officials, lawmakers, reporters, and the faculty of public and private schools who receive $900 or more in cash can be jailed for up to 3 years or fined by up to 5 times the bribe's value. But if the official reports a bribery attempt, they'll be exempt from punishment. The newly enacted law will have a 1.5-year grace period before taking effect, so the government has time to check whether the law may unfairly affect individuals. Pundits worry that the details of the law may be unconstitutional or may infringe on an individual's freedom and possibly destroy their family relationships. Public officials can also face punishment if their spouses receive gifts and don't report it to authorities. Critics say the law may even restrict social gatherings such as golf rounds, dinners, and drinks at bars, which in the long run could shrink the domestic economy. The government expects some 3 million people will be subject to the new law and will serve to enhance public transparency. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye has arrived in Saudi Arabia, the second leg of a Middle East tour. During the 2-day visit there, President Park hopes to expand cooperation with Saudi Arabia beyond the traditional oil trade. Our Choi Yoo-sun files this report from Riyadh.
It's only been 4 months since President Park Geun-hye met the Saudi king, who at the time was his country's crown prince and attending the G20 Brisbane summit. The presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae says this reflects Seoul and Riyadh's commitment to their relations. At Tuesday's summit, President Park and King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud are expected to discuss reinforcing their economic cooperation in the fields of nuclear energy, healthcare, and ICT. As a matter of fact, the talks are expected to focus on giving Korea a chance to export a small 100,000 kilowatt nuclear reactor to Saudi Arabia. That's about 1/10 the size of the more common type of reactor. Nicknamed SMART for its name System Integrated Modular Advanced Reactor, the multifunctional reactor can be used to generate electricity and desalinate seawater. Saudi Arabia is seeking new energy sources, such as nuclear reactors, to meet rising power demand. Riyadh plans to build a dozen or more reactors that can generate 18 gigawatts of electricity by 2040. President Park and King Salman are also expected to discuss a possible deal to work together in realizing the president's envisioned creative economy of converging culture with ICT and other sectors to spur growth and create jobs. With a deal, the two sides are hoping to share policies related to the creative economy concept and join efforts to vitalize innovation-based startups and centers to support them. Also topping the summit agenda for President Park will be a reconfirmation of Saudi support for her North Korea and unification policies. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News, Riyadh.
North Korea is reportedly ready to fire off a mid-range ballistic missile this time. Quoting military sources, local media say it deployed 2 missile vehicles a few days ago from its missile station in the northwestern Pyongan province. These missiles are known to be single-stage ballistic missiles that have a range of 1,300 kilometers and can carry a warhead of up to 700 kilometers. South Korean military officials say they are closely monitoring the north as the regime did fire 2 short-range missiles into the EC earlier this week. A Toronto-based church says it's lost contact with its Korean-Canadian pastor for more than a month now. The pastor was in North Korea for a humanitarian mission, and this is raising fears that he might be held captive by the communist regime. Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
It wasn't his first visit to North Korea. Korean-Canadian pastor Reverend Lee Myun-soo had made numerous trips to oversee a nursing home, a nursery, and an orphanage in North Korea's northeastern city of Rajin. That's why his Toronto-based Light Korean Presbyterian Church wasn't initially worried when they lost contact with him. After last hearing from him on January 31st, the church expected him to be out of contact until February 4th. When Im didn't contact them, members of the church waited another 21 days to allow for a possible Ebola quarantine. North Korea's anti-Ebola measures require foreign visitors to be placed under quarantine for 3 weeks. Im had been involved in a variety of missionary projects in North Korea for more than 20 years. The Canadian government says consular officials are in contact with Im's family, but declined to comment on Im's situation. North Korea takes a hard line against religion of any sort, seeing it as a threat to the ruling Kim dynasty. While a UN report estimates up to 400,000 of North Korea's 24 million population are Christians, that number is impossible to verify because none of them can freely practice their religion. In 2007, a Korean-Canadian pastor was detained by North Korean authorities for worshiping in public. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now, following a huge backlash in Korea, Washington has stressed that comments made by a senior U.S. official, Wendy Sherman, on East Asian affairs were in no way targeting any specific country. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
Washington has moved to clarify recent controversial comments made by a senior U.S. official and said its stance on historical tensions in Northeast Asia remains the same. This comes after U.S. Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman on Friday urged leaders to refrain from stirring up nationalist feelings. Seoul's foreign ministry had responded quickly, saying it would not take her comments lightly. Sherman's remarks were seen as being directed at South Korea and China, which are critical of Japan for denying its wartime atrocities, such as its sexual enslavement of women. And looking to diffuse the controversy, the U.S. State Department said Sherman's comments were not directed at a particular leader in the region. It added that South Korea and Japan are Washington's most important U.S. allies in East Asia, and that it's important that Seoul and Tokyo maintain constructive relations for peace and prosperity in the region.
Obviously, our 3 countries share a lot in common, and in no way was she speaking about any one person or any one country.
Harf did not elaborate, but the State Department told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency that historical issues should be dealt with in a manner that promotes healing and reconciliation. It emphasized that Japan's past statements apologizing to the victims of its wartime aggression marked an important chapter in Japan improving relations with its neighbors. However, there are voices of concern that the U.S. doesn't want to involve itself in Northeast Asia history because it wants to maintain its relationship with Japan. Experts say Washington is seeking to strengthen its relationship with Japan and Korea to counter China's growing military presence in East Asia. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Consumer prices in Korea last month grew at the slowest pace in nearly 16 years. Statistics Korea says the prices went up by a mere 0.5% from a year earlier in February, growing in the 0% range for the third month in a row. Officials attributed this to the recent drop in global oil prices, which has dragged down domestic oil prices by over 5%. Some analysts have voiced concerns about the possibility of deflationary pressure, while others have ruled it out, citing the fact that core inflation, which excludes petroleum products, grew by 2.3% on year. But Koreans have been busy spending their money outside Korea amid a slump in domestic demand. Among many factors at play is the surge in the number of people traveling abroad. Our Shin Se-min tells us more.
Koreans spent a record amount on credit card purchases last year, reaching $12 billion, largely driven by a steady increase in the number of overseas travelers. More Koreans have been vacationing in foreign countries thanks to the weak yen and cheaper oil prices, which also drove down airfares. The money spent on overseas trips in January alone hit a record $1.9 billion, the highest so far, marking a 17% increase compared to the same month last year. And experts say that it's not just the high-income earners who's been traveling overseas.
A stronger infrastructure and cheaper flights have made overseas trips more accessible to a wider income group, leading to more money being spent there. And more travelers are taking advantage of the stronger Korean currency and using it as an opportunity to go overseas, mostly to Japan.
In the first month of the year, Korea's tourism deficit reached over $640 million, up over 40% from last year, the highest in 4 years. Experts say the imbalance of spending in and outside of Korea will likely continue unless the government aims to secure more travelers visiting Korea, like arranging more local tour packages. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The burden of supporting the elderly on Korea's working population is growing. This year, the ratio of working-age people to the retirees over the age of 65 stands at 100 to 18. Now, this number has more than tripled over the last 4 decades. This year's figure is the highest since data collection began in 1970. Smokers in Korea are pushing back against a new law that bans them from lighting up in all restaurants. The I Love Smoking group, this is the country's largest pro-smoking community, has asked the Constitutional Court to review the legality of the law. They say it infringes on an individual's right to happiness and business owners' rights to profit, and are asking to allow bars and clubs to seat smokers in designated areas. The government imposed this law banning smoking in all restaurants starting in January to cut down Korea's smoking rate that's among the highest in the OECD. Would you give up chocolate in lieu of surfing the internet on your mobile devices? Nearly 8 out of 10 Koreans say they would. A recent study says 77% of Koreans could live without reading the newspaper and around 60% without books instead of going online. Fast food, alcohol, and coffee are indulgences that many respondents felt less attached to than the internet. A third of respondents even said they would give up cars and sex. With more applications, content, and financial technology services, the mobile internet is expected to be an even more pervasive part of modern life. Now, feeling angry from time to time is perfectly normal, but flying into an uncontrollable rage could be a sign of bigger underlying issues. Men under the age of 30 are said to be more prone to these dangerous outbursts, but there are ways to channel this energy in a more positive manner. Our Kim Min-ji tells us more.
A man recently drove his car into his girlfriend for breaking up with him. And another became violent in the middle of a highway tunnel after another driver did not give way to him. These are just a couple of cases that show individuals failing to control their anger. The intense rush of uncontrollable rage is normally linked to some kind of personality or behavioral disorder. A recent study revealed that out of 13,000 people who were treated for such disorders last year, 2/3 were under 30 years old. What's especially interesting is that although the overall number of patients hasn't changed much in recent years, the proportion of men in their 20s jumped 13% over the past 5 years.
This might be due to young patients feeling they were not rewarded enough for their efforts during their teens, and the anger and frustration builds up. They can feel no regrets about their bursts of anger as they feel they have the right to be angry.
Personality or behavioral disorders are not only characterized by angry outbursts. People with interpersonal problems and those who refuse to believe they have done anything wrong in certain situations may also have a disorder. Doctors say that finding a healthy and undisruptive way to release built-up anger and stress is key to alleviating such disorders. Taking the anger out on other people actually increases the frustration and can sometimes lead to bigger, even legal problems. Experts say the best approach is to focus on relatively strenuous activities like hiking or running, or having a hobby to focus on. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Top political advisors in China have gathered to kickstart the country's biggest political meeting. To tell us more, Paul Lee is joining us. Now, Paul, more than 2,000 members of this legislative body are taking part in this annual meeting, setting the tone for the National Congress on Thursday. What should we expect to come out of this venue?
Well, the first of the two big sessions, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, has just gotten underway in Beijing. It will cover many topics encompassing the full spectrum of Chinese society, but one of their focal points will be the country's military spending plans. Arirang's Kwan Soo-ah has more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's vision for a stronger China includes building up its army. Political leaders will be discussing ways to achieve that at the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and National People's Congress dubbed the two sessions.
An expansion of military power according to a nation's economic growth is inevitable. The same goes for China.
China's military spending had been on the decline until 2013, but increased by 12% last year to more than $130 billion, putting China behind top military spender, the United States. China's defense budget is expected to increase again this year, especially given the country's involvement in a territorial dispute with Japan over an island chain in the East China Sea, and Tokyo's announcement earlier this year of its biggest defense budget ever.
National defense modernization is the key to modern warfare. It's like the nerves inside the body.
There is global interest in the upcoming announcement as many countries try to narrow the gap in military spending with China. China's 2015 defense budget is expected to be unveiled on the opening day of the National People's Congress on Thursday. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And shifting to Russia, Paul, the funeral for the slain opposition leader Nemtsov is underway. He was shot dead near the Kremlin last Friday, with many describing the killing as politically motivated. Now, thousands are paying their respects today, but it looks like Nemtsov's European allies won't get that chance.
That's right. Several politicians from the European Union have reportedly been blocked from attending Nemtsov's funeral on this Tuesday. They include a Polish politician and a senior EU official from Latvia who were denied entry at a Moscow airport. Police security remains on high alert around the Serkov Center Museum, where thousands of Russians are mourning the 55-year-old opposition leader. A shocking murder has sent shockwaves across Russia, prompting condemnation at home and abroad. Many of Nemtsov's former colleagues said he was a victim of controversy.
He explained, discovered the problems, gave arguments, and a lot of people didn't like him. He became an enemy because he spoke the truth, but many people don't want the truth. Who could have imagined just 3 days ago in Moscow, in 2015, an opposition leader having been killed ostentatiously? He was shot down in the center of Moscow.
Nemtsov was shot 4 times in the back as he walked within sight of the Kremlin walls. This as Russian investigators say they are still tracking down the killers. Nemtsov was a fierce critic of President Putin and said he feared for his life just weeks before his assassination.
And meanwhile, in Iraq, a major offensive is underway by government forces to take back the city of Tikrit from Islamic State militants. What's the significance of this operation?
Well, Tikrit is considered a strategic battleground and will be Baghdad's toughest challenge yet in its fight against IS. It's a massive assault that has mobilized Iraqi troops numbering in the tens of thousands, backed by warplanes and local militia groups. Victory is also believed to be crucial for future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, also under IS control. Our Sun Jung-in has more.
The thunderous sounds of artillery and warplanes were heard outside Tikrit as Iraqi forces attacked Islamic State strongholds in the northern province of Salahuddin.
We prepared these weapons to dislodge the extremists from Tikrit.
The Iraqi Prime Minister ordered forces to regain the territory and to avoid killing civilians.
Our goal is to release the ordinary people from oppression and terror threats from IS. We must protect the lives of civilians and the property in the city.
The massive operation to retake Tikrit from the IS group is reportedly made up of some 30,000 soldiers. The Saddam Hussein's hometown fell into the hands of the extremist group last summer. The Iraqi military commander of the Salahuddin region, Abdul Wahab Asadi, told state television that the operation was going as planned. Latest reports say Iraqi forces have seized at least 2 districts near Tikrit. The number of casualties is still being verified. Unlike other anti-IS operations in Iraq and Syria, the United States is taking a back seat this time, as Iraq did not ask for any support or U.S. involvement. Instead, Iran's military is playing a significant role in helping Iraq drive the Islamic State militants from Tikrit. Capturing the town is viewed as crucial in any future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, also under IS control. U.S. military officials have said that mission could be launched as early as April. Sun Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And finally, Paul, the International Motor Show is about to kick off in Geneva with the world's leading automakers set to unveil their latest models. And this year's event has been somewhat overshadowed by rumors of this new player planning to take the industry by storm, and it's not a car maker.
Yeah, and that unexpected challenger is none other than the tech giant Apple. The conversation in Geneva is being dominated by the buzz around reports that Apple is gearing to introduce its own electric vehicle as early as 2020. In response, many car companies are hoping to meet the challenge with their own array of tech-savvy features. Volkswagen, BMW, and Audi are leading the pack with better smartphone integration and autonomous driving systems. But analysts say these cutting-edge trends may take many more years to adopt.
When you see the likes of BMW doing significantly well, continuing to talk about hiring more workers, VW also doing relatively well. And I think you see those mid-market brands, the GMs and the Fiats and Peugeots, perhaps continuing to be under some degree of stress.
The 85th International Motor Show in Geneva will officially kick off on Thursday. Around 130 new models and concept cars from 30 countries are expected to be unveiled during the 10-day event. Chery?
A feast for our eyes. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for those stories, and we will see you again in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather outlook. It's been a rainy and cloudy day nationwide due to a low pressure front, and light showers continue to fall here in the capital. And this means snow for areas where the temperature has dropped. So another 1 to 5 centimeters of snow is expected for parts of Gangwon province, while about a centimeter is in store for Gyeonggi-do and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces. And it looks like an umbrella is a must through later tonight, as another 5 millimeters of rain will drench most parts of the nation except Jeju. Now, brace yourselves for another round of cold snap once the system clears up. Cold air is set to move in from the north, leading numbers to drop tomorrow morning, and the system will jump back to seasonal average norms by Friday. On to tomorrow's readings. The daytime high here in the capital hits 3, Daegu 6, Busan hits 8. Meanwhile, Daejeon and Jeju should reach a high of 3, Dokdo 2, Kumgang -7. Those are the updates we're following on this Tuesday evening. I'll be back with more after 10.
Bo-kyung, thank you very much. And that does it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.